In this episode, we dive deeper into Roswell's past and the origin of the Sanctuary. Hey, my name is Rex, and it's time for the next episode of ReZero. Now this one, getting back to the backstory of the Sanctuary, the happy little family of Echidna, Roswell, Beatrice, and Ryuzu. Of course, though, it being a happy family means it's obviously not going to last, because that's how things go. Interestingly enough, though, we had seen Roswell kind of be introduced into this little family, I guess, with Echidna and everyone else, and we see that Echidna was able to help him out with controlling his mana in an interesting way. But I find it also weird or interesting, I say that too much, how she describes herself. After helping out Roswell, she describes herself as an evil witch who sometimes does nice things. And so even though she's put together this group of people or is taking care of them, and on top of that everyone else in the Sanctuary, even though she seems to be doing something nice, and even though this episode it kind of paints her more in a positive light, in the context of everybody else who she's with, her full motivations, her true motivations are still, of course, sticking to her as she's the witch, as she's the witch of greed. So I think that it is interesting that we kind of see it from this standpoint, and also this whole time in the flashbacks we're not seeing her eyes. She's kind of sort of off to the side because we're really focusing on Beatrice, Ryuzu, and Roswell. And I do like the relationship that they all have. They're all kind of like brother and sister all together, or at least Roswell likes Echidna, and just with how nice she's been to him. And especially, we see how later in the episode, he really, really does like her. And he's, loved her for what he says is 400 years. And so we kind of get to see a little more of this tragic backstory as a threat is coming, which reveals itself to be the Devil of Melancholy, Hector. So now we're getting even more, aside from, like, say, the Seven Witches, we're getting even more things like Vanity with Pandora last episode, and with Melancholy with Hector here, who he's really powerful, and he's beating Roswell to a pulp. However, their plan is to finish up the Sanctuary, finish up the barrier, which would use Ryuzu as the core for it, and which we know, ends up happening later in the episode. So while Echidna and Roswell are holding off Hector, sort of effectively, Roswell's of course getting beaten up. Beatrice is told to take Ryuzu to the crystal, the core, where she would then become the barrier, the shield, or everything for the Sanctuary. And it's really now in this episode that it's really apparent that it's focusing on Beatrice, as she hadn't exactly been the best to Ryuzu. I mean, she had kind of treated her like a sister, especially with what we saw in the other flashback, but she was still herself, her kind of bratty little self, and I guess that's just her. But now we're seeing, as she's told they have to part, she really, really does care for Ryuzu, and so it's a sweet little moment, but it kind of shows why she's just kind of, it gives her a little more motivation to kind of be how she is later on, a little more isolated from people, because the person who was effectively her sister during this time was taken away from her. And on top of that, just the other complications with not being able to be with Echidna, who she saw as a mother, and whatever else happens that's going on here, especially because what's going on with Hector, it really just cuts away from that whole thing entirely, because after this whole flashback we catch back up with Subaru and everyone else back with Roswell, as they're kind of relaying this to him, or at least letting him know that they knew what happened, they know the whole backstory. And so the whole thing with Hector, with exactly, the barrier exactly being shown to be set up, we don't see that. And, what exactly happened to this dude Hector, we don't know. But I think it's pretty obvious that he's just kind of gone now. I've seen quite a few theories here and there from people who know a little more about ReZero, who have been reading ahead, and it's kind of interesting to see their perspectives on it. But of course, as an anime only, it's just kind of a weird thing, because, you see this guy show up, and then he buzzes off, which again, apparently that's what that's still the case elsewhere in, in the novels and everything. But, again, that's really not the focus. A big chunk of the episode is the focus between Ryuzu and Beatrice, and I think that what made for a good core to the episode. Bad puns aside, the episode ends off with Subaru and Roswaal having their argument, their confrontations. And again, this is where Roswaal gets really heated, because he lets them know that it's been 400 years that he's been thinking about Echidna and that he's loved her. And an interesting thing, he says that he's been thinking about her and he's been without her longer than he actually was with her. And but he still feels the same way, because he's going on with this whole thing that feelings can't be changed, and which comes into conflict as he's kind of berating Garfield a bit, who he sees his feelings have changed, from his perspective, in that he was on one side and then now the other side. But of course, Garfield kind of confronts him a little, or at least defends himself in that his feelings, haven't really changed, but just his perspective on everything has. The interesting also thing is how Roswaal kind of says that he and Subaru are similar in how they're kind of fighting for someone that they love, or at least that they're doing what they're doing with someone in mind. Again, Subaru with Amelia, and now we see with Roswaal and Echidna how they're both basically for these people. There's, a witch and a witch's daughter, apparently. So now we're seeing their kind of ideological confrontation just kind of coming to a head here, and I think this was, a good fine episode for additional backstory. But again, it's odd how it kind of seems a little unresolved. But of course, that's just giving additional information toward this current story that we have here, at least showing us a little more motivation, especially for Roswaal, and a little more insight to Beatrice as well. But I definitely enjoyed it. It felt like it went by pretty quickly as opposed to other episodes. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you enjoy this episode? Are you looking forward to next week? What are your thoughts just overall? Leave a comment below. We'll continue the discussion down there. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe to show your support, and you can enable notifications by clicking that bell icon next to the subscribe button. Anyway, this has been Rex. Have a nice day.